Hi everyone, I'm Beth and I'm a feminist. It's not always easy being a feminist, but but I do love it. And something that is at the moment keeping me up at night is it's not about the pace of innovation and it's not about economy, because we know that AI is thriving in those spaces. For me, it's about the fact that women are being designed out of the future. And that really, really scares me. And so I know this is the last panel as well, so sorry for the fear factor that we're about to hit you with. I'm sure lots of people here have read the Lovelace report. And you know, the report estimated that the UK is actually losing between £2 and £3.5 billion a year, and that's because of the massive amount of women that are, once they're in tech, they are leaving. It's actually over 60,000 annually, and that's the minimum. But this talk is all about AI, and I will introduce our brilliant speakers. So if you come up, so we've got Zehra Chatoo and Sheridan, who you've already met, but just on a final point while they take their seats, just under their faces, thank you, this is all about AI, and AI isn't neutral at all, we know that. And there's huge gaps in that ecosystem that we're definitely going to get onto a conversation where we can help, but we're also in a very interesting might not be the right word, but we're in a cultural moment. And can we have a show of hands on who's watched the Manosphere documentary? Okay. Most people, so very, very scary. So this is about change, and this is not just about having women in jobs and encouraging them and letting them lead and keeping them there in a way that they're thriving, but this is also about shaping culture. So I'll introduce my brilliant guests. Sheridan, you've already introduced yourself. But one thing that really stands out for me about your background is the incredible statistic that you shared around the impact that you had when you were at PwC. I think it was getting women into tech roles, increasing that at PwC from 14% to 40%. Hopefully I've got that right. Yeah, just incredible. But Zehra, over to you to introduce yourself.
Hello, lovely to be here. Thank you for having me and great to see you all. So I'm Zehra. I am the founder of Code for Good Now. We're a strategic consultancy and training company with a mission to minimize bias in AI adoption when it comes to women. And we also minimize bias in advertising. So we've built an AI model that identifies stereotypes in advertising. We test different large language models on a monthly basis to identify how they're tackling stereotypes in advertising, and we apply it to advertising content. And I'm ex-Meta, so I spent many years having a front row seat to AI. So I see the opportunity, but I also see the challenges. And I also sit on the board of UN Women, so equity in technology is something that's really, really important to me in this subject matter.
Brilliant, thank you. So Zehra, we'll start with you with the questions. So there's definitely growing evidence that there's a gender gap in people adopting AI when you compare men and women. So from what I've read, it's that women are adopting AI at rates of 20% less than men. Why do you think that is, and why is it important? And then I'll come over to you, Sheridan, to ask your perspective after.
Great. I mean, it's interesting. I think we've heard some of the insights earlier today as well. But what we see, so that it's a really interesting study done by Harvard Business School, which looks at over 140,000 data points and identified that there's a gap of around 20 to 22%. However, it does seem like that gap is narrowing, but women are using it less frequently. And funnily enough, to Lee's point, the number one reason why women aren't adopting it as much as men is fear of cheating and being seen to, and the judgment associated with fear of cheating for women specifically. So to earlier points, it really is very much around culture. It's a non-tech issue, actually, because even when access to technology and the ability to use tech is equalized, we still see this gap. And then I think the second point is sort of after this fear of cheating, it's trust and ethics, which are really important data points for us to take on board as to, okay, there is a good reason why this technology isn't being used, and why we need to have actually those voices as architects of this technology to mitigate against that.
Thank you. And from your perspective, working with young women and organisations, what do you think is contributing to that gap, and how do you think it's impacting on women leaving tech and AI?
Well, I think, can I come at it slightly differently? Because I almost want to just give you the overview of why women are leaving, and what you've just said is completely spot on and related to all of that. But if I start with, if you like, there's a leaky pipeline across all the moments that matter in a girl's and woman's life. So, the early years is about what happens in schools, and that determines who enters. The mid-career level, it's culture and progression that determine who stays. And when you get to return, it's returner pathways that determines who comes back. And then when you get to mid and beyond, in terms of advancement, we talked about sponsorship. It's robust sponsorship that determines who advances. And we talked about all the things that you just said. I actually think, although it's a non-tech thing as well, I think those things I talked about earlier, negative perceptions, what you talked about, all of these things feed into all of that leaky pipeline. They all affect it. So I can talk about, maybe we'll come back to it, I can talk about lots of things that can be done about all of those moments. Obviously Tech She Can, the charity that I founded, is all about stopping that situation between 5 and 18 and making sure that we're putting girls and young women in the best possible position with inspiration. We're raising inspiration, and we're addressing the aspiration, the ambition gap to get more people to enter, more girls and young women to enter. But then there's things you can do throughout the whole pipeline. And the Lovelace was really good in showing, really busting myths, particularly around the mid-career women.
Yeah, thank you. So on that, just moving on from that point then, as women are underrepresented in every level of the ecosystem, who do you think holds the power in the ecosystem to stop women or encourage women not to leave?
Sure. So, I think that the challenge is, to your point, we see this bias and gap at every single stage. And so I think there's slightly different sort of solutions across each space, but I think that really calls for the fact that we need longer, wider tables with voices across the board, from schools to education is massive, to corporates. I think the biggest challenge, and what we really need to face into, is the fact that this is technology where the user base shapes the outputs. When it comes to AI, those who use it shape it. So if our voices aren't using the technology as much as men, we're not as represented in the output we see. And so bias scales fast. And so for me, it's very much around how do we mitigate against that specifically.
In terms of the power, it is the reason I wanted to sort of show that leaky pipeline all the way through, is because obviously then you end up with a very one type of leadership, because we're not addressing those things. And so, those who hold all the power to create the AI are going to look very similar. And I think that's where, we've already talked about some of these themes today, but that's where, at a government level, at a national level, we need to work across that whole pipeline. And obviously the government can influence parts of that more than they can others, in terms of things like what happens in schools. But in organisations, if we're to change what leadership looks like in AI, if we're to change this image of it that I spoke about earlier, we have to address all those pipeline issues. So, when I talked about what happens around progression and culture at mid-level, why we lose so many, which is what the Lovelace report is about, everybody has these hypotheses around it's because women leave to have children. Bollocks, it's not. Only 3% of respondents in the Lovelace report said it was for caregiving. The biggest things were, I'm not progressing. I don't know how I can progress. The opportunities aren't there. I'm not getting fair access to the projects that are going to make me visible and advance me. I don't think people see me as a future leader. It's those sorts of things. And these are things that can be solved by, I talked about it earlier, having the right processes and metrics and performance metrics. I call it the 3 C's, that, you need commitment from leadership, you need the right catalysts in place, which is your processes, all the things that are going to make the culture change. And then craft is the last one, that you need to implement these catalysts in a way that suits your organisation, and that's organisational knowledge. It's going to look different for your company than it is for a company like PwC.
Yeah, and it's such an important point, just building on your point, Sheridan, around culture. Especially when it comes to AI, I think that the culture is really interesting because it does ask you to experiment and test more, and actually, women are unfairly judged in the workplace. We know that. And so this point around, having someone who takes cover for you, or having this space, or creating conditions for safe spaces, brave spaces where we feel as women we can test and we can experiment and not be judged for that, I think is a really important part of it too.
Yeah, thank you. And I think to your point, Sheridan, on, let's get to practicalities, what can we do? I'm going to ask one question now to you both around practicalities, but then I'm going to open the questions up to everyone here. So start having a think about any questions or comments that you want to throw our way. So, Zehra, what do you think organisations can do now to create environments that mean that women are welcomed in because of their skill, and then they are backed to really thrive and stay on their terms?
That's a big question because there's so many things that need to be done. I mean, I know, I feel like I should really only pick one. I'll say maybe 2. One is, I do think we need really strong KPIs, and I think, measure what you treasure. I think we really need to measure this, and we need to measure that we have diverse perspectives at the table from women representing and having our voices there. And so the opportunity to interview, I think, is really important, to make sure you have a diverse pool of candidates for interviewing for that process. And then, of course, it's up to the candidate and the process, but I think opportunity to interview is key. And then the second thing, just to build on my point previously, around, optimize for learning rather than experiment, rather than perfection within cultures. We so often have to get the perfect answer, and that's role models, back to your kind of earlier point. But I think with this technology, we do need to have a level of vulnerability. We're never going to know it all because it is moving so fast. And to role model that vulnerability, that we don't know it all and we have to test, and optimizing for learning, and really trying to challenge this culture around perfection, I think is a really important piece too.
I love that. I think it's really important to have a culture of failure, if you like, learning and learning from that and that vulnerability. I think that's so good. So I think overall, I want to see organisations do what I was outlining earlier, look at that whole pipeline. What are the things that you need to embed across it? But I give you one thing that anybody that leads a team can do today, tomorrow, that makes a massive difference. One of the things that most makes women leave is the day-to-day crap that they feel they're exposed to. So you go into a meeting, you're the only woman in the room, or there's 1 or 2 of you, and it's mostly men. And I'm not talking about anybody, can I just say that men have supported me all throughout my career. This is not a criticism of men. It's a criticism of cultural structures and habits that don't serve diversity in women. So one thing you can do in your next meeting is adopt something like a round robin practice. So everybody gets to say something. Tell everybody beforehand, or a different person presents in each different meeting. It's just making sure that every voice is heard. If there is somebody, whether it's a man or a woman, that's more nervous about speaking up, then help them, coach them, go to them, look after them. It's these little things that happen every day that are often the result of whether somebody stays or leaves.
Yeah, thank you. I love what you said about vulnerability there as well. So does anyone have any questions for Sheridan? One at the back. Shall I shout? If you can. Go for it. Shout away.
We were talking about agentic AI earlier, and if you look at the structure of a lot of businesses historically, particularly finance, legal, technology, law, women sit in the bottom 50% in terms of the majority of where women are in the business. And as we know, it's sort of gets thinner and thinner, the wedge, as you go up to the top. With agentic AI coming in, and those roles at the bottom potentially becoming AI agents as opposed to humans, do you think there's a imbalance in the threat of AI potentially to women over men because of the types of roles that we hold in organisations?
Yes. We know from multiple pieces of research that a lot of women's roles and jobs in particular are more susceptible to automation, AI. And that's because many women hold things like customer services, administrative, management types of roles. So yes, they will be. And what's happening in organisations is exactly what you just said. You've got that triangle. What's happening is it's going to end up being a diamond. So how do you then create the right jobs? How do you do learning and development? What does that mean for graduate recruitment? All of these things. In terms of for women, I see it as a massive opportunity for women and for us as a nation, because women have all those transferable skills. If 70% of call centres in the UK are women, 70% of the people working in them are women, think about all the skills they have: customer relationship management, collaboration, team building, empathy, emotional intelligence. All of these things are what we need in an AI world. What we need to do is have things in place, whether it's at government level or organisational level, regional level, that have skills, reskilling and retraining for women that are going to be in these situations. I believe in a segmented strategy for different populations that are going to be affected by what's happening. That's what I'd like to see at a national level, but I'd also like to see it at a company level. I'd also like to see companies look at the future roles, because a lot of roles, even in tech, like product development and design, are all going to be done by AI. Guess who are the majority of the people that are in those roles? It's women. When it comes to tech, a lot of them are in those types of roles, not the deep techie roles. So again, it's like, let's look to the future of what the roles will be, working with a team of AI agents, checking that they're behaving properly, checking that what they're doing is ethical. Let's convert women into those roles straight away because they have the skills to do it.
Yeah, brilliant. I don't know what more I can add to that excellent answer. I would just reinforce the point that feminist leadership is based on accountability, collaboration, empathy, and that's exactly what AI systems need. I think the second thing I would just also add is that when it comes to using AI, in many ways, AI kind of agents and assistants, or AI assistants specifically, they're brilliant at prediction. They can, they're predictive machines. What we have is judgment and critical thinking, and it's the application of that to prediction to get us to the best output. And actually, critical thinking and challenging and questioning and bringing through empathy are, in fact, those skills that you've just mentioned. And massively undervalued, exactly. And those are the skills that will be the most important as we move in and as we are in this space.
Yeah, thank you for your question. What's your name?
Alex.
Alex, nice, thank you. Any other questions? Yes, at the back. Are you happy to shout?
Yes.
Yeah?
Can we use the microphone because then they'll hear us on the phone? So we have this one. Can you catch it? Yeah?
Yes, I'm president of the National Council of Women, GB, and we work very hard campaigning on AI, addressing AI harms and social media. but asking for safety by design. But on the other hand, we are training our members in AI. We're encouraging as many women as possible who work in AI to join with us and help us campaign from a sensible base. I'm wondering what else you could suggest to a campaigning and membership organisation to help empower women.
Is this a question for
and
you?
combine that with safety.
Because it's health related.
I'm not sure I have the answer to this specific
Oh, right, that's
question.
okay.
I'm staying sitting here. You can.
Just because you
Should I leave you alone?
with health, I didn't know whether you had.
I wonder if it's the mentorship, sponsorship angle.
No, I was just actually going to say that it's such an important question. I think actually legislation is really critical to this question as well. I was at the UN last week, and that was probably the subject that was discussed the most and highlighted the most for that reason. So I don't have I'm not providing a solution. What I'm saying is that it's a critical question. It's one that's under the microscope, which is encouraging. It'll be interesting to see the actions that have come out of last week on that space, but I really believe legislation is key to this.
Yeah, I don't have a magic bullet either, but I agree with what you just said, and I'm actually not familiar with what was happening last week, so you're probably better versed on me than this. Is there anything you think we can help you with, or anything that any of us or any in this room that you think we could help you with?
Well, I mean, getting involved with us is impossible.
Yeah.
Because we need your expertise. We need to. So we're in contact with applicants with Department of Health because we think it's a public health issue, and the consumer minister because we think there should be consumer redress, not just the technology minister. But what we say really needs to be grounded in expertise. So.
Well, happy to talk afterwards.
Right, I've just been given the 5-minute wave, but I'd rather hear your questions than me stick to my plan. So are there any, we've probably got time for one more. The lady here. We'll talk to you after.
Thank you for inviting me to speak. I'm Dan Davidson. I'm a fellow at the Energy Institute. Obviously, when it comes to sex, heat, power, light, it touches everyone at every age. But it's particularly tough for people who are elderly. It's something we really haven't touched on today because we've mostly looked at younger people. But one of the speakers on the panel did mention we've got a huge cliff of people who are going to be ageing very quickly in the next few years. A lot of them will be retiring. By 2030, almost 30% of our workforce will be retiring. If you look globally, just in China alone, by 2035, they will have an over 50 population which exceeds the entire population of the USA. That is huge. They have already been planning upfront, decades ahead, to actually offer what's called social contracts. Now, these social contracts will allow people who traditionally would have retired to upskill and continue in the workplace at their own choice, so that they can continue to augment their pensions and their financial situations. As we reach a huge cliff here in the UK, where a lot of projects which have a lot of AI embedded all come online to deliver legal undertakings to deliver 2015, 2030 net zero obligations. AI will be embedded into a lot of those. If we are seeing workforces which are diminishing by 30% by 2030 in the UK alone, how are we actually going to deliver all these objectives? Will we be falling back? Will we be failing to deliver? Will we be seeing power outages? This will affect all of our sexes, all of our age groups, all of our nation. Whereas if we offered something like a social contract, where people can actually push forward those projects and work longer if they wish, that could enable us to have a quantum leap forward in delivering 2030, perhaps even sooner, and even 2050, even sooner. And so that we can have a greener, better place for us all to live in. but also to help us to start to really jump forward in terms of gross domestic product as a nation, where we're flagging at the moment because we're so much taxation to try and keep things going.
Thank you.
I'm just saying, really, have you thought of age? Because it's clearly ticking on for all of us.
Thank you for the question. It's such an important question. I want to make sure that we've got time to answer. I'm not sure we might have to properly answer it afterwards, but are there any brief?
Well, I completely agree with you on the age component, of course. And while I think the UK government is doing some amazing things, they have been quite focused so far on younger people. And I think digital inclusion, I work with Future.now, which is a fantastic organisation, also very involved in government, which is all about digital skills for everybody, the general population. And, certainly you should look that organisation up. It's led by Liz Williams, and she is doing a lot of work with government on how do we actually have digital skills for everybody, not just people in work or, people in trying to do technology careers. It's like, what are the essential digital skills we need for everybody? So there is work going on that.
Yeah, and I would just probably just add to close that I think what that really highlights is the importance of representation in this moment of all audiences and all age groups when it comes to this technology. And actually, this is the moment that we can still drive change because we're still in it, so we can still build for it. But it won't last for long, but that's why this moment's so critical.
Thank you, and thank you for your question. So back to our panel just for one last question. You've both had really impressive, non-linear, brave careers. I know this is a really tough one, but the question's coming. What is that down to? What have you relied on to get you there?
Well, that's a big question. I think so. I guess I would say that I'm really clear. I've always been really clear on my values and what my why, and that has navigated a lot of my choices. Equity's been something that has been hugely important from the very start, and so that's just directed a lot of my moves. And I therefore took roles inside organisations that were far from perfect, that I felt I could drive change within and challenge the bias in the systems, which I was able to do, which is great. And then that took me to actually setting up on my own because, you can't always drive change from the inside. But I suppose with that point, for me, it's just been knowing my values. Also, not every big career choice needs to be a conference call. People have different values. And when I shared what I was going to do at each stage, whether I moved from advertising to tech to my own thing, there was lots of challenges. Really, you're going to do that? It's a huge risk. So, not everyone has a great opinion, but it doesn't have to be your opinion. It doesn't have to be a conference call. And then I think just being surrounded by incredible people around me, women and men, who have advocated and I've advocated for them. And just the power of community when it comes to navigating your career, I think is really important as well.
Well, I agree with all of those things. I mean, for me, it's come down to three things. And I think, I can't remember what I've mentioned and what I didn't earlier. I know I mentioned stories. So for me, it's curiosity, being prepared, personally prepared, and storytelling. And I talked earlier about the storytelling bit, how those stories that I took from books because they were my role models. That's just where I took my inspiration from. What they taught me is who I wanted to be, what was the type of person I wanted to be, the values that you talked about. Curiosity has led me to pivot multiple times in my career and in my life. That is, curiosity for me is one of humankind's greatest attributes. It drives innovation, it drives everything. It drives our desire to explore and, find the answers, all of those things. And I think being personally prepared, as a dyslexic who left school with no qualifications and was bullied constantly for being a Dumbo, I can honestly say that running throughout it all has been an absolute determination, something, again, that is often undervalued, but determination to better myself, to help my family, to put a roof over my child's head because nobody else was going to. Those sorts of things, determination. You have to take determination from wherever it gets. But it's all of those things, I think, that led me to sort of get to where I have.
Thank you. So what I'm hearing is knowing your why, having people around you, if you're lucky to have them, and having that community. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here, and thank you, Sarah and Sheridan. The one thing that I'm taking away just before I hand over to Zara is that it's really clear that if women aren't in that ecosystem, then the tech that is created at the end of it is going to reflect that gap, which we can't forget that. So thank you very much again. I'll just pass over to Zara Shah, who's the founding chair of the UK AI Women in AI group.